Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
It's Dr. Mike Patterson. Welcome to this episode of the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about what it takes to be a great leader and build effective teams. I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to speak to my guest today because she cares deeply about creating positive workplaces where everyone experiences dignity and respect. And if you are a regular listener to this podcast or you have read any of my books, you know that this doesn't happen by accident. It requires an intentional effort on the part of leaders and every employee to demonstrate respect, care, and appreciation for everyone on the team. It means giving everyone a seat at the table and a voice in the conversation. It's then and only then that we will see both people fully engage and the organization thrive. Over the last few weeks, I've worked with clients who are in the middle of their annual or semi-annual employee engagement survey season. It's the time of year when we ask employees to provide feedback on their experience with the organization. And oftentimes there's a sense of trepidation among leaders because they're concerned about what they might see in the survey results. I've also heard concerns from rank and file employees about whether they can honestly respond to the survey, as they openly wonder about whether it's truly safe to tell leadership what they're really thinking and whether anything will change as a result. It hurts my heart when I hear these concerns because we can do so much better. When employee engagement is low, it's an extraordinary waste of employee productivity and human potential. We can absolutely create cultures where people and performance matter, and we consistently elevate both. Let's jump into our conversation with Dr. Robyn Short to get her take on what we can do to pursue this goal.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
My guest today is Dr. Robyn Short. Robyn is the founder and CEO of the Workplace Peace Institute, a consulting, training, and research firm that brings peace and dignity to the workplace. And boy, don't we need more of that. She also works as a peace-building trainer, mediator, racial equity coach, and restorative justice facilitator. She's the founder and publisher of Good Media Press, an independent book publisher whose mission is to promote peace and social justice through books and other media. Dr. Short is an adjunct professor at Southern Methodist University in the Master of Conflict Management and Dispute Resolution program, Lipscomb University's Conflict Management Institute, and the Master of Leadership and Negotiation at Bay Path University. She has authored 4 books. She's a delightful conversationalist, and I'm excited to welcome Robyn Short to the Mission First People Always podcast.
Mike, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Well, it is great to talk with you. I'm curious about, exactly what the Workplace Peace Institute is, what it does. I have to say it is an intriguing name for an organization. I know we have a lot of conflict in the workplace, but turning that around and focusing on creating peace in the workplace sounds more appealing to me. So tell us a little bit about the Workplace Peace Institute, what you do and how you do it.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. So the Workplace Peace Institute is an organization systems design and research firm that's exclusively focused on supporting organizations and creating a workplace culture where people can thrive. We know that when people thrive, organizations thrive. And I came into this work through the conflict management dispute resolution field. I was working as a workplace mediator and conflict resolution trainer. And what I found over and over and over again as a mediator is the conflicts that were showing up at the human level were just a manifestation of something not working inside the organizational system. And so it felt like, it reminds me of that metaphor, and I don't know the story exactly, but when you keep pulling drowning people out of the river, go upstream and find out why they're falling in. So I wanted to go upstream and really figure out what's happening in our organizations that are causing people to experience so much dysfunction, so much conflict, and really ultimately suffering. So while I think the role of the mediator is obviously really critical, and we all need conflict resolution training so that we can engage directly in conflicts, what we really are looking for is peace. We want to be able to experience human security and dignity in the workplace. And research from Gallup paired with research that I've done in my own work shows over and over and over again that when performance management systems are oriented and structured around basic human needs like psychological safety, justice, belonging, cultural security, participation, people contribute at their highest levels. People thrive, and in turn, organizations thrive. Productivity increases, employee engagement increases, and then obviously, ultimately, the bottom line grows.
You know, I love that metaphor you offered around going upriver and finding how and why people are falling in. You know, as you've worked with organizations, what are some of those causes of people struggling, falling in the river, as you say, and then not thriving in the workplace, struggling, not feeling a sense of dignity? What are those systems issues that you tend to see?
At a really high level, I think about this from an organizational paradigm perspective. And paradigms are the way we do things. And usually the way we do things are unintentional. We're just modeling or mirroring what we've experienced previously. So we don't have a lot of intentionality around the way that we're showing up. From an organizational system perspective, I follow the work and research of the organization development consultant Frederick Laloux, and draw really deeply from his book, Reinventing Organizations. And in his work, he's identified several different organizational paradigms that organizations are operating in, and he's color-coded them just for simplicity perspective. I've gone a little bit deeper and categorized, kind of bulked some of these paradigms into what I call Newtonian organizations and quantum organizations. So the Newtonian collection of organizational paradigms are organizations that are structured with a deep hierarchy. You have a C-suite that sits at the top of the organization. They're making the decisions around what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and delegating that downstream, essentially. And what's happening in that structure, in that hierarchical structure, is about power. Power sits at the top, and the further you come down the hierarchy, the less power you have, which means the less control you have over your work life, and the way that you're able to show up and contribute to the organization. Quantum organizations are organizations that have flattened that structure. They're operating at a flat structure versus a hierarchical structure. Power is redistributed across the organization, and the how and what of the business is done through committees that show up with the purpose of what is necessary for us to achieve our mission. So highly mission-focused organizations that are putting power in the hands of those who are closest to the problem. And I think of these as quantum organizations. And the reason why is really deeply why I was really resonating with the work that you do. In a quantum organization, relationship is everything. The relationship is where power resides. The relationship is how we know one another. It's how I know myself, and it's how I experience my expertise. So therefore, the role of the leader shifts from being the person who holds power and delegates to the person whose job it is to mobilize the experts that live inside the building, who are working inside the building. They are there to mobilize and bring forward the wisdom, the expertise, the knowledge, and to mobilize people toward the fulfillment of the mission. So they're the stewards of mission, and they shift into being human behavior experts, people who understand the human condition and understand how to bring forward the best in people.
So as you know, that's what I talk about, write about. That's the way I feel about leaders. Are there certain industries or types of organizations that more easily transform themselves into quantum organizations, or can any industry, type of organization, size of business become that quantum organization with the kind of leader that's really focused on bringing out the best in people and being that good steward of the mission?
I don't think that there is an industry or sector difference. I do think that there is more success in organizations that are privately held because of the nature of a publicly held company and the fiscal responsibility to kind of always squeeze out more revenue becomes the real mission of the organization. And that is not a mission that inspires or really motivates or encourages people. So my just personal belief is that privately held companies will have more success operating in a quantum organization because they don't have that fiduciary responsibility to the stakeholder itself, like those folks who own actual stocks. And therefore, unless of course it is a business structure that is a public benefit company that has the ability to hold equal responsibility to the social good and to the stakeholder. So the short answer is I think that the privately held company is structured in such a way to be able to utilize, to be a full quantum organization. But I think teams inside of any organization can operate from a relationship first structure.
So once you identify the paradigm that the organization is currently operating from, and we recognize the need to make some changes, what are some of the things that you do or recommend to your clients to do to create that change and movement toward a more people-centric, mission-driven organization?
Mm-hmm. So we go through a theory of change process, which is essentially you've engaged Workplace Peace Institute because you have a core belief in the foundation of what we're doing, that all humans thrive when their basic human needs are met and when dignity is met, right? So like you have this core understanding that that's the direction that you're going in. So the very first step is to get really clear on what is the outcome that we're looking for in this process. And then what are the conditions that are going to have to be in place inside our organization in order for this outcome to be a reality, and begin to sort of backward map your way into how we're going to achieve this desired outcome. So that theory of change process will really ultimately build your strategic plan. And then there is the communication that goes around that, the messaging that goes around that, the possibility that we need to reimagine our mission and our vision as an organization to ensure that the outcome we're looking for is in alignment with the mission and vision of the organization. And then we'll need to begin to train the leaders to be good stewards of this new business model, and to begin to learn new skills in terms of leadership that shifts their own leadership style away from a hierarchical delegation perspective and into a more relational model that I think of as the leader's primary role is almost as an encourager. Someone who's there to encourage the best in people. And I also think a really critical piece of this is that the leader becomes very, very proficient in conflict resolution skills. so that they are able to bring about positive outcomes from the inevitable conflict that happens because we're humans.
So, Robyn, let's say I'm a skeptical executive, and I hear what you're saying, and it sounds good, but tell me about this concept of peace in the context of me wanting to be profitable and me to be successfum, and me to want to grow my business. Does peace make me money?
Peace does make you money. And I'm going to talk about this primarily through the perspective of employee retention. I can talk about this from a couple of perspectives, but what's coming to mind for me really is around employee intention. We're living in a really interesting era of human history where we are experiencing significant disruption in all aspects of our life. There was a time period not too long ago where very few people, if any, knew someone who lost their home through a flood, knew someone who lost their home from a wildfire. And now I think most of us know someone whose lives have been radically impacted by climate change. So climate change is beginning to actually shift the way people are experiencing the world around them in really significant ways from the perspective of stress and how stress and trauma impacts our ability to show up. We're living in an era of human history of unprecedented political divisiveness that is having real impact on people at a human level from the perspective of stress and trauma. And all of these disruptions that are happening in the world that are completely and totally outside the control of any one human individual, right? As a single person, there's very little that I can do to influence these big major disruptions that are actually really impacting me. You know, the pandemic is another one, and scientists are assuring us there will be more pandemics coming. So people at an individual human level are beginning to get very clear about what they can change in their lives in terms of reducing stress and reducing trauma that they experience. And our workplace where we work is one of the few things that we as a single individual have any ability to exercise control around. And I think that is a huge driver of the Great Resignation. To that same point, there is a new generation of workers coming into the workplace, Gen Z, who is the most diverse workforce that has ever existed. They're the most conscious, diverse workforce as it relates to racial equity and expectations of diversity, equity, inclusion. 1 in 5 Gen Z population, one in 5 of the Gen Z population identify as LGBTQ. And so this group of people who are just now emerging into the workplace have extremely different expectations of their work environment than any other generation before them. And it's only going to be a matter of, 10 or 15 years before Gen Z is the primary group inside of an organization. And what we're seeing right now from this generation is they won't tolerate it. They are leaving the workplace faster than any other generation ahead of them. So Gen Z is coming into an organization and on average leaving in under 2 years. So in order to retain the workforce in the future, in the next 10 to 15 years, CEOs are going to need to look at the organization and get really focused on how the organizational culture is impacting the human and the human's ability to really thrive if they want that person to stay and contribute and produce what this organization has come around to produce. And I think it's really critical from just if we think about, the supply chain of the human worker, right? If there is a generation that's coming into the workplace that will not tolerate what they experience as oppression and they're continuously leaving, it's going to have a radical impact on society as a whole in terms of all of the things that these organizations have come together to produce to make our lives work.
You talk about human security as being a sort of a foundational element or need that we all have, this need to feel safe. How does, and you just made a compelling case for being very attentive to the needs and maybe unique perceptions of Gen Z. How does helping people feel safe factor into leadership development and how we lead and design organizations? How do I, as a leader, help my people feel safe at work?
That might be one of my favorite questions. So we feel safe when we experience justice. And the definition of justice that I operate from is that all people have access to the resources necessary to achieve their potential. So justice for me is going to be different than justice for you. We feel safe when we experience cultural security, meaning whatever faith I have, I can openly and actively communicate, talk about, and practice. We feel safe when our identity is accepted. So if I am a member of the LGBTQ community, I can come into the workplace and talk about my honeymoon, my family, my life with as much freedom as anybody else can. If I'm a person of color, I have as much access to opportunity as anybody else does. So this ability to be fully and wholly accepted as my identity for who I am as a person is core to safety. We all feel safe when we belong, and belonging is not being included. Belonging is, I know that I am co-creating with this organization. I have a seat at the table because I have a right to the table, not because someone's invited me to the table. I'm able to participate, have self-esteem. So all of these aspects, all of these basic human needs are really critical to my ability to feel safe. When I feel safe, I am now operating from a brain circuitry perspective, from the areas of my brain of creativity, of critical thinking, of collaboration. So when we don't feel safe, we stay in a fight or flight mode and we're defensive. When we do feel safe, it opens up the whole brain circuitry in terms of being able to be and act and contribute as a whole person. So what leaders need to be able to do is show up and be agile to the individual needs of the people on their team. And that requires a radically new skill set. It requires our ability to have intense emotional intelligence skills, cultural intelligence skills, dignity intelligence, relationship intelligence. We need to be experts. Truly experts in conflict resolution. We need to be extremely proficient in diversity, equity, and inclusion skills. And borrowing from my leadership consultant, Meg Wheatley, we need to prioritize being more humans. And I don't think many leaders are really thinking about their role as being experts in human behavior, but that is actually what's necessary for people to be able to show up and be their full, complete, authentic self in the workplace, which is what is necessary for them to contribute all that they have to contribute.
You used a term that caught my attention, a term that I haven't heard before, and I think it's powerful, and I want you to explain it to us. What do you mean by dignity intelligence, and how is it connected to the safety thing you were talking about? What is it? How do I get it?
Sure. Yeah. So dignity intelligence is a phrase that I coined really from the work of the scholar and peace building practitioner, Donna Hicks. She has a dignity model that when I came across this, it just lit my whole world up. It was the piece that had been missing for me in this work. So in her dignity model, I think she defines dignity a little bit differently. I define dignity as our inherent worth and value as human beings. So dignity is a birthright. We as human beings have inherent worth and value, but our inherent worth and value is consistently violated through our interactions with other people. So she's outlined 10 essential elements of dignity, 10 ways that we experience our inherent worth and value. And I may not list them all off on the top of my head, but it is acceptance of identity, the ability to be acknowledged, recognized, experience fairness, have the benefit of the doubt, autonomy, independence, and a few others that I'm not going to be able to think of off the top of my head. What I have found in my own research is that acceptance of identity, acknowledgement, fairness, benefit of the doubt are what I think of as the superstars. Those are the dignity superstars. Those are the ones that really resonate with people and therefore are likely the ones that are most chronically violated. When we experience a dignity violation I'm going to say in the workplace because it's the context of my work, but when we experience a dignity violation, our brain actually registers that as a safety threat. And so as humans, the way that we process information, we are emotional creatures who think versus thinking creatures with emotions. So we have emotions first, and those emotions direct our behavior. So what happens is there's stimuli that happens, right? There's a communication, there's something that I'm experiencing in my environment that comes into my brain circuitry. And the first place it stops off is my amygdala. And that amygdala makes a determination of whether I'm safe or not safe. If I'm safe, then that stimuli moves on to other brain circuitry. It goes into my emotional processing, my analytical thinking, my frontal lobe, where processing and analytical thinking and reasoning takes place, all the places that we need for people to be fully engaged in order to do their work. If it registers that I'm not safe, then it goes into fight or flight mode, which when we are in fight or flight mode, we are actually incapable of learning and connecting. We're in defense mode. So dignity intelligence is so deeply critical to our ability to thrive in the workplace because it is directly connected to how people experience safety. If I'm safe, I can do all the things necessary to produce what I'm here to produce. If I'm not safe, then I am in I'm in retreat mode and I'm in defensive mode. And those are the unengaged people. So Gallup research shows that pretty consistently year over year, 70% of the American workforce is disengaged. And they're disengaged because their inherent worth and value isn't being experienced.
If I'm listening to this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, my dignity is being violated in my workplace. I sometimes don't feel safe in my workplace. What advice do you give a person like that, whether they're Gen Z or, an old guy like me? What do you tell us in terms of what to do?
I think the most important thing to do, I think there's two things that are really important. One is we need to engage in the learning necessary to have the language to name what's happening for me. So part of what happens is a big piece of what happens is I'm experiencing a dignity violation and I know it because my heart is racing, my hands feel clammy, I can feel my neck turning red. I'm having a physiological response to this thing that just happened, but I don't have the language to name it. And if I don't have the language to name it, I don't have the ability to advocate for something different. So a big piece of this is really to do the development work to really understand what our basic human needs are and to be able to name what's happening in real time. And then I teach people that I work with, leaders and staff. I kind of think of all people as leaders because we're leading in different ways. But the folks that I work with, I'm a huge proponent of nonviolent communication, which is a methodology created by Marshall Rosenberg. And it's a really simple 4-step process that helps a person self-advocate. I I can name what I just saw. I can identify the way it made me feel. And because I know how it made me feel, I can name what I need. So if we don't have the skills to name the violation that just happened, then we don't have the skills to ask for something different. So the very first piece is actually to grow your own competencies around dignity intelligence so that you can be an advocate for yourself. And as a leader, it's to ensure that you're actually being a good steward of the dignity of others and preventing those violations from happening.
So I am a team leader in a large organization. I've got a handful of direct reports. I've got 5 layers of leaders above me. I'm kind of in the middle of the pack there from an organizational hierarchy perspective. What's a piece of advice that you would give me to be a better steward of human dignity for the folks on my team? And maybe we should just focus on what are 1 or 2 things our listeners can start doing right away to be better stewards of human dignity.
So this is going to sound so basic that listeners might kind of balk from it, but it is grounded in research. High quality, frequent one-on-one meetings with the people that report to you that begin with the question, how are you really? Do an emotional check-in. Because we are feeling creatures who think, when we begin our encounters with a real, genuine check-in on how a person is feeling, we open up the capability for us to be vulnerable for one another. And that vulnerability is critical to getting real, honest, genuine feedback from that person about what they're experiencing, right? They begin to feel safe because they're hearing that you really care. So one is you have to have the meeting. You have to have the meeting weekly, weekly at best, every other weekly, but every other week, but no less frequent than that. Because people are so accustomed to having low quality one-on-one meetings, they tend to think that they don't have value, but a really high quality one-on-one that begins with an emotional check-in and that is designed to get to know that person, build relationship rapport, gain clarity around what their needs are in the workplace, what their hopes are in the workplace, what their desires are, what materials, resources that they need. So really just building authentic, genuine relationship with the people who report to you and being an advocate for them in the relationships up the hierarchy. So I'm going to take this feedback that I'm getting on these weekly meetings through these genuine relationships that I'm building, and I'm going to advocate for change up the ladder. And then I'm going to be transparent with the people who report to me about what's possible and what's not possible. So I also think radical transparency in our communication is really critical.
So I love that very practical advice. It's not difficult and it doesn't cost a nickel to sit across from someone on your team, someone that you care about, someone that's an important contributor to your team's performance, and simply ask the question, how are you doing, really? I love that advice.
And Mike, in a recent LinkedIn conversation that I was following with you, in your previous podcast guest, you had someone on who was talking about the value of deep listening and active listening. And I go back to the quote from David Augsburger that being heard is so closely related to being loved that the average person doesn't know the difference. Those one-on-one meetings that don't cost anything but your time will convey to the person that they're worthy of love. And that is probably the number one most motivating feeling and emotion that we humans have.
That's powerful. Robyn, thank you for being a great guest on the Mission First People Always podcast. I'm sure there are many people that want to now get to know you. How can they reach you and learn more about the work you do at the Workplace Peace Institute?
Yes, thank you. They can certainly go to the website, workplacepeaceinstitute.com. They can follow us on LinkedIn by just searching Workplace Peace Institute. And of course, they can connect with me personally on LinkedIn by searching Robyn Short, Robyn with a Y, last name Short.
Great. Thank you, Robyn. What I've learned from this conversation that I will take away and start practicing immediately is be a better human. Be a more human, be a steward of dignity for all the people that I influence and associated with. That is a powerful message. And I will carry that and start practicing this question that Robyn gave us. How are you really? These are great insights that Robyn has shared with us today. I hope you, our listeners, found great value in this conversation. And until next time, be a great leader because your people deserve it and your performance will ultimately prove it. Thanks. God bless. We'll talk again.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.